Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rabbi Cass. I'm a Sofer in Muncie, New York. You can find me online at sofercenter.com. So today we're going to talk about how to put up a mezuzah. There's probably a lot of videos on YouTube that teach you how to put up mezuzahs, and a lot of them probably focus on what's the correct height and perhaps what's the correct side of the door. But being a practicing Sofer, not just a rabbi who will tell you the halacha, the laws on how to put up the mezuzah, I have what I like to call stories from the trenches. Daily putting up and taking down mezuzahs, and I've seen the way mezuzahs have been put up, and in what cases and what manner. And I'm going to be focusing a lot on that, not so much actually the height and the correct side of the door, because honestly, I think that that's something which is a little bit more complex. I mean, the height. Maybe I'll talk about the height a little bit, but for the right side, the left side of the door, there are so many different factors that you have to take into consideration that could affect which is the correct and the proper size of the door, as well as different customs on how to do it. It's impossible to address all of them on a YouTube video. The best way to have, if you have questions on how to, which side of the door to put up mezuzah, you can always message me. I'm available for video consultation, or if you're locally, we could schedule to have a Sofer come to your house and actually do a walkthrough. And because there's so many things you have to take into consideration, from one room to the next room, which is the more important room, or the flow of the foot traffic, or which way the door swings, or there's so many things that have to be taken into consideration that I'm not going to focus on that. Today I'm going to focus on how to put up a mezuzah, with what materials and what cases, and so on. So I think it's proper, before I talk about how to put up a mezuzah, even briefly to talk about what is a mezuzah, because when you understand what a mezuzah is, you'll understand why it's so important, and how we put it up. Okay, so just very briefly, this is an example of a mezuzah. Okay, so what you see here, there's two paragraphs. These are actually paragraphs in the Torah, and the reason why there's two paragraphs written on the mezuzah is because there are two places in the Torah where it commands us, God writes that we should take the verses, the words from these parshios, from these sections from the Torah, and actually write them upon the doorposts of our gate, of our home, and upon our gates. So if you look here, you'll see, which means you should write them on the doorposts of your home and upon your gates. And again, over here later on, you're going to have it. You see it over here. So this is the Shema prayer, which everybody knows. It's proclaiming our faith in God, among other things. And then the second paragraph, which is basically talking about, so to speak, the nuts and bolts, how Judaism works, the rewards and the punishments. If you follow the ways of God's commandments, and nice things will happen, the early rains, the late rains, and there'll be blessings and everything. Versus, don't bow down to foreign gods, and so on and so on. So God tells us these are two very essential sections from the Torah. So God says, take these words and write them upon the doorposts of your gate, and upon your house, and upon your gates. Now, how is this written? So this is parchment, which is made from actually animal hide, and this is written by a Sofer such as myself, with a feather, with a quill. I have one right over here, with a quill just like this, and it's handwritten, letter by letter, word by word. Now, to write something like this could take several hours. But more importantly, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because a lot of times people think that the mezuzah is just the plastic case. They don't realize that there's actually something inside. So the plastic case, which we're going to talk about momentarily, is actually the protective covering, what actually holds inside of it a scroll just like this. The mezuzah, the parchment, it's actually rolled and then inserted into the case. So because this is there's something inside of the case, and it's actually something which is very delicate, and it has to be treated and protected if it's going to be on the outside of the house. So that's going to be something that we're going to be talking about right now, the different types of cases that you can use. So mezuzah cases that can be used inside of the house, pretty much any case can go. There are reasons, for Kabbalistic reasons, that people will refrain from using metal, because it's brought down that metal is actually made from barzel, and barzel is a material which cuts life short, so like with a sword, so to speak. And to put a mezuzah in something which is made out of metal it's not appropriate because we know that the reward for the mezuzah is actually written in the mezuzah itself. It's Laman Yirbu Yimechem V'Yimei B'nechem. We're talking about the mezuzah, and it says in order that it prolong the days of your life and the days of the children, your days. So it's not appropriate to put the mezuzah, which its reward is long life, in a material which cuts life short, so to speak. So for many those who follow Kabbalah would refrain from using a metal mezuzah case. To my understanding, this doesn't apply to silver. Silver would be okay. The only thing with silver cases, I will tell you that the silver will tarnish, and then sometimes you can have cleaning help be spraying the mezuzah case in order to clean it off and to tarnish it, and that spray could be a problem for the mezuzah. So you have to keep in mind, if you're going to be using a silver case, whenever you're having the mezuzah, whenever you want to polish it, just make sure you do it very carefully, that none of the spray or no cream should, whatever you call it, should not go on the actual mezuzah itself. And of course, if you're going to have cleaning help, if they're taking down the mezuzah to polish it and put it back up, you have to make sure that the mezuzahs are put back up by male or female, actually. I'll mention that in a second. They have to be either bar or bas mitzvah, and obviously a Jew, in order to put the mezuzah back up. Somebody who's obligated in the commandments, so which would obviously be a Jewish male or female. Now, a question I get a lot of times is, is a woman allowed to put up mezuzah? Because we know there's a lot of mitzvahs which is called mitzvahs, which are dependent on time. A lot of mitzvahs which are time related, women are exempt from because there's obligations for the home, and it's hard to. There's different reasons from Kabbalah, from Halacha, why women are exempt from certain commandments. But one of the mitzvahs that a woman actually has an equal obligation to a man is mezuzah, because mezuzah is not a mitzvah which is by day or by night. You have an obligation to have a mezuzah on your doors by day or by night. So a woman or a man, whoever owns the home, has an obligation to put up the mezuzah. And if they want to assign somebody else to be their messenger or representative to put up the mezuzah, which a lot of times people do, they'll ask me to come to the house to put up the mezuzah, then I will do that for them as a shliach, so to speak, on their behalf. So otherwise, inside the house, pretty much any other case can go. Plastic, I've seen all these types of cases, glass cases, wood cases, you name it, I've seen it. Now, when putting up mezuzahs, we're going to focus now on the inside of the house. When you're putting up mezuzahs on the inside of the house, I really try to use screws when possible. I find a lot of people use nails. The problem with nails is that you can only really use the hole once. You hammer in the nail, and the mezuzah is holding strong. And then when you take off the mezuzah to check, the holes are already there, and the nails don't do anything to hold into the hole anymore. And the second time you put it back in, they're usually very loose. And actually, even before that, getting a mezuzah case out of the doorpost, especially if you have a delicate case like a glass case or a silver case, to have to pry the nail out of the doorpost very often ends up damaging the mezuzah. I remember where I once I was in somebody's house, and she had these beautiful glass mezuzah cases, and they were in with these nails like about 1.5 inches long, and I was really trying very hard because you don't have anywhere to pull you have to work off the back of the mezuzah in order to pull the nail out. And if it's a glass case or a silver case, which is very delicate, and they have like a very thin layer of silver around the nail, it's easy to hammer it in, but to pull it out, you need to be able to get it out without damaging the mezuzah case or the door. And very often that's what happens. Either you damage the doorpost or you damage the nice silver case or the glass case, whatever it is, versus a screw. If you use a screw, it's very precise and it's very easy to take it out and put it in. And the hole also, it's reusable. You can take it out and put it in 100 times, and the screw will still hold the mezuzah onto the case strong. So I know, like I see, like in a lot of times in publications where they have like these, a new building is dedicated, and they have like all the rabbis come, and they're all holding these beautiful hammers, and it's nice for the picture, but practically speaking, get a drill like this and use the drill, because it holds the mezuzah in the door so much better. Now, the other thing you have to realize is the screws that you're going to use. The cases all have these very narrow holes, and one day I'll have a word with the manufacturer, who actually, the guys who make Mezuzah cases. But until then, we have to use these really narrow screws. It's called the number 4 screw. It's not easy to find, and they also only work with a number 1 Phillips, the number 1 Phillips for the bit. So the screws are hard to find. Most people don't have that bit on hand. It could be a little bit tricky, but it's worth it to get to find the screws, get the screws. If you want to buy the screws online, I find that I can get the number 4 screws. You don't have to buy 1,000, but I buy them in 1,000 at a time. BoltDepot.com. Okay, I don't get any any commission on this, but they have the number 4 screw where you can find. And then I found if you need to get a longer screw, like 1.5 inch long number 4, which is virtually impossible to find. Bolt Depot doesn't have them either. You could find them at fastener.com. You can find their number there, and you can buy them there. So yeah, so that's what I would say. Also, you have to be very careful, inside or outside. They make Mezuzah cases. I'm trying to think if I have one here. Let me see if I have one I can show you. Okay, I don't have the Mezuzah case here, but basically, if you look at this Mezuzah case here, you'll see the hole where the screw goes through. It's actually it's in a separate compartment from the actual place where the Mezuzah goes. So the Mezuzah can only go this high, the Mezuzah can only go this low, and then the screw goes in a separate. Okay. Sometimes in these very decorative cases that you'll find, they don't have a designated spot for the screw, and I get sometimes Mezuzahs for checking, and I find that because the hole is in the same compartment as the parchment where it goes, a lot of times people hammer the nail or put the screws and it goes straight through the parchment. So when you're buying a Mezuzah case, it's important to pay attention and see, how is the parchment protected, that when I'm putting in the nails of the screws, it's not going to be hitting into the parchment. So that's something you have to really take into consideration. I think I have pictures of that on my website from a couple of the instances where I had such a thing happen. So, but again, in the more decorative cases, the people who design them don't see the back end. They're not in my position. They don't understand the hazards that they're creating when they make these cases like this. So decorative cases are beautiful, but you have to take into consideration the cloth, which is of course the most important part, right? The case is nice, it beautifies them, it makes the mitzvah more beautiful, but everybody will agree that the parchment inside is the essential, most important part of having the mezuzah. So I think that covers a lot of putting up the mezuzah on the inside of the house. Sometimes if you'll have so in doorpost screws work great, wooden door frames, but if you'll have like a drywall or a metal doorpost where it's very difficult to put a screw into, or the drywall, the screw won't really hold because there's not really anything to hold it. It's just like it's like powdery. So then I would use a double-sided tape, and that's usually sufficient in order to hold the mezuzah. Now, that's pretty much it when it comes to the inside of the house. When putting up mezuzahs, of course, the height is something you have to take in consideration. Generally speaking, we say it's about within the top third of the doorpost, but that's why I don't really want to go into this so much, because there's so many different scenarios. You could have a low doorpost, you could have a high doorpost when these rules change, right? So, or arches, and there's so many different questions. And if you do have these kind of doorposts, I would say you can reach out to your rabbi or a Sofer who's very involved in putting up mezuzahs, and they'll give you exact instructions on where the mezuzah needs to go on your door, because I have stories where I've gone to houses where they have like a two floor arch in the front of the house, like two flights up. And I remember I took down all the mezuzahs, and as I was leaving, he said, "Did you get the mezuzah from the arch?" And I said, "Where?" He's like, so we came outside and he went, "Up there." So I looked up there, and the mezuzah was like 15 feet up, and I was like, "What?" So he says, "Yeah, well, his uncle helped him put it up. They had to get up on a ladder to put the mezuzah up because it needs to be in the top third." Well, when you have a archway like that, that's two stories, then the mezuzah we don't follow the top third. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of different scenarios. When you're putting up the mezuzahs, unless you're really proficient in the halachos, it's better just to have a professional do it. Okay, so like I said, you could WhatsApp me or call me and we could do a video consultation. Or I can come to the house, or one of the Sofer works me can come to your house to help you, put them up properly. Okay, so now the outside of the house. Okay, so the outside of the house, you have to be much more careful what mezuzah case you use. And the inside of the house, sort of, as long as it holds the mezuzah up and it's not a case which is going to damage the mezuzah, or and you're not putting it up in a way that's going to damage the door or the mezuzah case, you're pretty much fine. But in the outside of the house, you have to be very careful. I'm going to show you some of the cases which I've taken down from homes and what the mezuzahs inside actually look like, and people are not aware what what the cases need to be. What kind of cases you need to have for the outside of the house. And the reason why this is important is, remember, because the case is not just the wood case or the metal case, or it's what's inside. It's the mezuzah that's inside. And like I always like to tell people, I say, if you want your mezuzah to protect you, we know the mezuzahs are shmira. When you want the mezuzah to protect you, you need to protect your mezuzah. Okay? So I'm going to show you now a couple of cases that people have had on the outside of the house, what the mezuzahs look like, and we're going to try to figure out, and I'm going to explain to you why it's important to have what I call a waterproof case, a mezuzah which is meant to go on the outside of the house. Okay, so the first kind of case, where did it go? There it is. Okay, so all too common, people will go into a Judaica store or they'll go into a Sofer and they'll buy mezuzahs. And either the Sofer or the Judaica store, they won't ask them, where are you putting this scroll? Where are you putting it? Is it going on the outside? Well, then you need to have a proper case. They'll just, they'll buy the scrolls and they'll sell them the scrolls and they'll walk out of the house. And this will be a standard plastic mezuzah case, but it doesn't have to be this. It could be a wood case like this. It could be a metal case like this. Okay? None of these are good options to go on the outside of the house. And well, the most obvious one that is a problem is this one, because there's two things we're afraid of when we put a mezuzah on the outside of the house. The first thing is the sun. The second thing is moisture and humidity. Now, the sun is very strong and very powerful. A case that's in the sun for any amount of time, for a year or 2 years, a clear case will eventually do something like this. It'll turn yellow, and that's from the rays of the sun. But it damaged the case. But because it's a clear case, the sun's ray does not stop at the plastic here. It goes all the way through. So the mezuzah that was in this case, which was originally a clear case, it came out like this. I don't know if you can see that. There you can see, okay? Remember, this is parchment. And what the sun did was it dried out the parchment. And as you can see, broken letters on the cloth, and obviously that's not considered kosher. Okay? So the first thing we realize is we cannot have a mezuzah in a clear case in a spot where it's going to be in the sun. Now, I have sometimes people, they tell me, well, I have an overhang over my door and the sun doesn't really shine over there. Or it's between a storm door and the main door. So, and they really want to be able to see the cloth inside the case. So then there are such things which we do make cases which are waterproof, which keep out the moisture, but it would be a clear case. But here's the thing. I've seen it happen where mezuzahs, somebody will take that into consideration and they'll say, well, it's not going to be in the sun, or it's going to be between the storm door, so let's just make sure it's waterproof, but it doesn't have to be sunproof because the sun doesn't shine over there. Problem is, in 6 years you move and you're like, oh, outdoor case is an outdoor case, and your next front door doesn't have that overhang and it doesn't have the storm door, and then we'll find where the mezuzah will end up being in the sun. Or the mezuzah will be gifted to somebody else, or passed on to a son or a relative, and they don't know, they just know it was on the outside and they think it's good for the outside. I've seen all these situations happen. So what I'm going to tell you right now isn't just because it's right now, this is the conversation. This is the best kind of case that you can have for the outside, a white case. Now, why? Because it will reflect the sun. in addition to being sunproof, a proper outdoor case is also going to be moisture proof. So it's going to have a plug like this. Oh boy, that's strong. I remember when I first got these cases, I wanted to test to see how waterproof they are. And I took a piece of paper, I stuck it inside, and then I weighted it down in a bucket of water overnight. And in the morning, I took it out, and the paper was still dry. So I have full confidence, full faith in these Mezuzah cases to keep out any moisture and any water from them. So this case would be considered a fully waterproof case because no moisture can get in, versus a case like this where the back is open. Okay, look at this. Unfortunately, this is a Mezuzah that got wet. Okay, the cloth disintegrated. So, and if it doesn't disintegrate, it'll do other things, like this. It just gets moist, it gets wet, a little water dribbles in, either that or the letters sweat, and yeah. So moisture has to be kept out. We do that with a plug. Sun has to be kept out. We do that with a white case or any case. It could be a dark case if it's not going to be in the sun, and if you can make sure that it will never end up in the sun while being outside. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes I have people, they tell me, well, I have a case like this, for example, a metal case, and look, the opening is on the bottom, so water can't come in if it rains from the top. The sun can't get it. It seems like it's a good case. So the thing is, there you have to realize the plug that you have on the standard metal cases is a very different plug than you have. Sorry, I should have taken this out before. It's a very different kind of plug than you have on the waterproof cases. Look at this. Can you see the difference? This gives a nice airtight seal, where this, all the moisture can go, can get right in. It doesn't have an air seal, a tight seal. Now, another thing, this actually happens to be a plastic plug, but on a lot of the metal cases, they actually have a metal plug as well. And what happens is, after a couple years, if it gets wet, the plug actually gets rusted in. One second. The plug actually gets rusted in, and it's impossible. Here, I have a couple of cases like this where I actually had to have a guy like saw open the bottom of the Mezuzah case. Can you see that? Because the plug, he drilled it, then we tried different ways to get it out, but we couldn't because the plug was stuck. So metal Mezuzah cases are not good for that. Well, first of all, they're not waterproof. The Mezuzah that came out of this case was actually the one which I showed you a second ago. Was this. Okay, this Mezuzah that got water damaged, you see the smudged letters right there by my pinky, and then again down here? That Mezuzah came out of this case. So it did not hold out the moisture. The bottom of this case, it got wet and it got rusted shut. In addition, metal is a material which really absorbs temperatures in an extreme way. If you ever touched a cold metal railing in the winter, or a hot railing in the sun in the summer that's been in the sun, you know it's hot and you know it's cold. So a Mezuzah which is in a plastic case won't get as cold, it won't get as hot when it's in the sun, even if it's a darker case, as a metal will. So basically what I'm saying is, when a Mezuzah gets hot, it makes it swell a little bit. When it gets cold, really cold, it constricts it a little bit, and through the seasons and the days, it goes back and forth, and you basically have the Mezuzah in a material which will make the Mezuzah go through much more dramatic changes than, let's say, a plastic or a wood case, which doesn't get as cold or as hot. So there's a lot of reasons not to use a metal case. One from Kabbalah, like I spoke about earlier, Barzell, those who follow Kabbalah, it's proper not to use, inside or outside, and outside is just as practical reasons as well. So metal cases are nice, but if you want to use it for the inside, it's great, but really not for the outside. Also, like, here's another example. I have these wood cases. Also, the plug that it has is a similar plug. It's a similar plug to this, so it's not great at holding out the humidity. Also, some will argue to say that it's waterproof, it's shellac. This would be more like water resistant. I have a mezuzah. Actually, it's the exact same case. Can you see this? It's the exact same case. And this was in the sun for a couple of years, outside for a couple of years. And the mezuzah that came out of it, okay, moldy, ruined. Okay, so there you have a problem. Now, so I hope from what I'm explaining to you, you'll understand and you'll appreciate why it's important to put the mezuzahs in a case such as this, which it doesn't let the sun get to it. Another thing actually I'll mention to you that the sun can do, here's an example. I don't think I showed you. Okay, this is actually the reason why if you ever get mezuzahs from me, you'll see that they're wrapped in wax paper, not saran wrap. A lot of siphon wrap mezuzahs in saran wrap, but saran wrap is not heat resistant. So if for whatever reason a mezuzah, which was, even if I intended it to be put indoors and somebody later put on the outdoors, if you have it wrapped in saran wrap, what that does is in the sun it melts it onto the mezuzah and it totally ruins the mezuzah. The wax paper which I use, it's not as clear as the saran wrap, but when it's on the mezuzah, you can see the shot guy good enough. That's actually not a good example. There you can see the shot guy good enough on this with the wax paper, but at the same time the wax paper is heat resistant and it's also water resistant. So it's like a even if the mezuzah is not in a waterproof case, it does do a better job to protect the mezuzah than does the actual saran wrap. So I don't recommend wrapping mezuzahs in saran wrap ever, because if it ever ends up outside in a clear case, the mezuzah will be ruined much more faster than if it was in a wax paper case. Now, one other thing I want to mention when putting up mezuzahs on the outside of the house is if you want to use if you want to use tape in the inside of the house to put up all your mezuzahs, that's fine. I will mention, actually, I see sometimes people use Velcro. With Velcro, you have to be very careful. Sometimes it doesn't hold so well. It really has to be strong and it shouldn't be dangling. So, you know, Velcro, unless you can get like the really strong kind of Velcro, it's better to use the like a double-sided tape, just as this. Now, double-sided tape is nice, but the thing is like this: if it's outside and you're using double-sided tape, I find that if it's in a place where it gets wet, what'll happen is if you use a standard tape like this, the rain will actually dissolve the tape, and then the mezuzah will fall down. So if you're going to be using tape on the outside, there is a special tape. I'll show you right now there's a special tape like this. It's more expensive, but it's waterproof. So if it gets rained on, then the mezuzah won't fall down. So because of this, because this tape is more expensive, if I can, then I would prefer to use screws, just because this tape it won't hold as well on the outside. So when I can, I'm always going to use screws on the outside of the house. If I can't, because it's a metal doorpost or whatever the situation is, then I will definitely use that tape, because that is the only tape that's really meant to be used on the outside. Let me think if I missed anything. One last thing about the double-sided tape is that on the outside, in the summer, the double-sided tape, if it's not going to be in the rain, it tends to hold well. But in the winter, I find when the doorposts are really cold, the tape it loses its effectiveness. It doesn't stick. So I mean, if when you put it on in the summer, it's warmer, it's hotter, this tape sticks, it will hold throughout the winter, assuming it doesn't get wet. But to try to put a double-sided tape on a cold surface, you can Google it. It actually I don't understand. I mean, I can't explain to you why it doesn't work, but the tape does not stick on cold surfaces. So that's the fact. So that's why, generally speaking, I will try to use screws on the outside of the house if I can. Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps up the video. I think so. Again, if you need any waterproof mezuzah cases, you can find them on my website at sofercenter.com. I have a specific link there for waterproof cases. I do have a whole selection of waterproof cases, some lighter and some darker colors. Like this would be a different design, but again, it's a plastic case with a proper plug that'll keep out the moisture, keep out the sun. It pains me, it hurts me to see mezuzahs get ruined from the sun or the rain, and So let's take care of our mezuzahs, everybody, okay? Like the video, share the video, subscribe to my channel. There's more stuff coming. You know, for years I resisted making a YouTube channel, but as I see more fatalities with mezuzahs, I feel I have a responsibility and a chrayas, so to speak, to share this information, and people have to be aware to properly take care of the mezuzahs. Okay, if you have mezuzahs that were on the outside of the house and you're not sure if they're kosher because they may have been water damaged, you can mail them to me. We'll check them for you and send them back. I'm going to put links in the description for the waterproof cases, and you know, for our services, a link for our services if you want to mail things to us for our address and all that. Okay, so I think that's it pretty much. Take care. Okay, bye bye.